Rabbi Mordecai here. We're on the early morning motivation, depending on what time of depending on where you're at in the world. Maybe it's early morning, maybe it's afternoon, but either way, we're connected with one soul. So we're building out. We're gonna start going into a new place, a new era, where it's about bringing the Torah even closer to a way that we can access it. Like, just when I say access it, it's like I feel like, like you have a child, for example, right? And you really want your child to understand something, like whether it's something of danger or something of benefit. And you really sit back and you think about how to explain it to this kid based off of his personality and how he's going to respond. And you get all of it and you break it down to that level where the kid understands, like, hey, you can open the refrigerator and get something to eat, or don't walk out in the middle of the street, whatever. Don't trust strangers, whatever it is. Understand what a stranger is versus relatives, but you brought it to a level where they're able to access it. So I feel like, the next chapters of human evolution, human involvement is around taking the concept of connecting to our fellow man and being able to see the value in our fellow man and being able to see the neshama of our fellow man, right? And be able to see the neshama in creation, see it in nature, right? To see it in our fellow man, to see it within ourselves, right? So that's like how do we get to that place, right? And it's not about some mass religious movement, because we haven't seen that in any collective group in religion, right? I mean, there's been movements, there's individuals, there's groups, there's a shul, maybe, you know what I mean? But it's like, there's no mass movement where everybody's just righteous and everybody's reaching their potential, right? So if that's the case, so we can't say, oh, well, you know what? Everyone should become religious and that's going to make it, that's the solution. No, we have to start imagining a world of people who see godliness in their fellow man, right? Like, it was just random. I overheard some girls talking, over Shabbat, and they were mentioning about a guy and his assets, you know? They were mentioning that. They were talking about guys, single girls, they were talking about a guy, and the term assets in relation to one of the guys came up. And I was just kind of whoa, that's really intense, just to be thinking in that way. But it's a tremendous marshal, right? Because a person's assets is not necessarily something you could see. I mean, perceivably, maybe you could print it out and maybe you could show this, or you have a code to an account, maybe you could access somebody, whatever, you have different things. But at the end of the day, it's a non-tangible concept. I mean, some assets you could say are tangible, like say someone owns real estate or something like that. But still, when he's walking down the street, the real estate is not with him, right? The house isn't marching next to him, everywhere he goes, right? He's by himself, but he has connections to these things, right? He has connections to these other aspects, and you're able to analyze and see that connection when he walks in. When certain celebrities walk in the room, you oh, I just read an article about him. He's worth $100 million. Oh, he's a multi-billionaire. Oh, he lost $1 billion, right? So we're able to see a person and attach this additional value to them, right? We can all do that, right? So if we can all do that, if we can all look at people and give an additional value on the economic front, or even say intellectually, oh, well, that person went to Harvard, so they must be smart, they must know this. Oh, they're a history major. Oh, so this person could have slept every day in class and somehow passed the class, right? And we're looking at that person because they have a degree and say, oh, well, if I need to know something from history, I have to talk to a person who has a history degree, right? And so we're able to do that. So if I'm able to attach value and attach connection from a place of Gashmias, right? If I'm able to do that, why can't I do it in a place of Ruchnias? Why can't we teach a society to see a world where everyone is looking at the soul of a person and the different levels of the soul of a person? And even though we can't really see the light, we can still see the light. You can still see God's presence around us, and you can see his aura and all of the positivity and all the gifts and all the benefits and all the things that Hashem is constantly providing for us all the time. Our mind is, in the same way that our mind is inundated with information in this new era of technology, our minds can be inundated with thoughts of Hashem. And it's just, we just thinking that. Now, someone will say, wow, Mordecai, that sounds so lofty and so grandiose. And what do you mean? But I'm saying, I'm looking at it in a very tangible way. If people can think one way, why can't they think another? I mean, it happens all the time. It's like in the music business, entertainment, all the time. People are into one brand, and then you slowly persuade them to go to another brand, right? People are into one, sports team, then they get some players, and then now they're into another. Now they went to another team. People change things that they're passionately about and move from one place to another. People have the same experience with property, land, countries. People leave. People are able to change dramatically. So why conversation through Ruchnius, and through this conversation of Ruchnius, to say like, well, how can we build that ability to see? If I could see that somebody's worth $1 billion and none of that money's with them, they just walking around and they have a t-shirt and jeans on, but they walk around, and because I'm able to know that they're connected to all these assets and all this power, just the mere fact of me knowing that, I connect to this additional power. It's like LeBron James walks in a room and everybody like, whoa, LeBron James. Have you ever been in a room where someone famous walks in? Everyone just like freaks out. Oh my God, so-and-so's here, blah, 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 blah. But wait, why? Oh, he was in that movie. It was crazy. Okay, but the movie's, but he's not in the movie. I mean, the movie's not now. Like, oh yeah, he was so amazing. Oh, his album. Oh, that song. Oh, this. And it's just like that's attaching additional things to a person, even though those physical things don't exist. So I'm saying that the human being, why can't we create the imagination of being able to look at a person, and just as I know that person has bones throughout their body, and I have seen enough skeletons in my life that I could see that, like, if I had to imagine someone like with their arm, bones, and these things look like, I could do that, right? I'm not saying I walk around thinking of bones, but I'm just saying if I wanted to, I could, right? So why can't we educate our fellow man, our neighbor, on the fact that there's a soul there? And there's a soul there, and that soul has specific needs, and that soul has a tremendous power over everything that the human body and intellect experiences. And us knowing that and being aware of that and being connected to that and being able to see that, and to be able to see that there's godliness, there's sparks of God inside of the trees, inside of the plants, inside of the animals, inside of the ground that we're walking on. Right? And we could go even a step further and say, like, you know what, there's an energy that comes into this world that gives me the ability to talk, to walk, to think, to have desires, to have ambitions. Right? There's a strength that I'm given to do that. And the same strength that's giving me the ability to walk, talk, think, have desires, have critical thought, is the same entity that's created all this godliness around me on the outside. And the same entity that created all this godliness on the outside and all this stuff on the inside of me also created the challenges that I'm going to be experiencing. Everything is Hashem. And so when they talk about ego and these types of things, we're not talking about a guy who says, I should be president of the United States. We're talking about a person whose mind decides that, no, there is no God in that particular area. It's me. There's no Hashem there. It's me. I'm having a problem right now. It's not that it's not like Hashem is probably a problem. No, I have a problem. I have a challenge in front of me. It's me. It's me. For whatever reason, I'm dealing with the challenge. It's me. Hashem's not there. And so I'm responding in that way. Oh, the strength that I have? Oh, it's because I worked out. Yeah. I worked out, so I'm stronger today. Yeah. I bring my strength. I make the strength happen, right? I do this, right? So from that place, this is how this is the world that we have to battle against. This is the level. This is the level. All the tefillah, everything that we're supposed to be doing is what? So I want for thyself, as I want for thy neighbors, I want for myself. Right? That's the whole point. There's some sages that say that's the purpose of the entire Torah. Is to get the human being to the point where the things that they want for themselves, they want for their neighbor too. Right? Sometimes you hear rich people always say, it's like, they said the only problem being rich is like, you just have way more money than all your friends. So you can't do all the things. I mean, they can't do the things that you can do with them unless you pay for it. You're not that rich. I mean, you're rich, but it's like, come on. And they don't feel good. So at a certain level where you want everyone to have just as much as you. Can you imagine that? Rich people, they say it all the time, especially guys who grew up in the hood and had a tough life and they made it big and some type of thing. They always say, man, yeah, all my friends, and you have all these new friends that can do what you can do. And they say like, oh, he's fake now. He only hangs out with rich people. It's like, no, like I wanna go to vacation. The resort's like 30,000 a night or 30,000 a week or something. You know what I mean? It's like, come on. It's like, we want to stay there for a couple weeks. We're gonna have parties like every night. Like every night's a different theme party. 2 weeks. 60 grand we'll pay. Right? So how many of your friends could just drop that? Right? So you get to a point where you wish your friend had 60 grand, just extra 60 grand. And they were a multimillionaire and their business got big and they just made it big. And you guys could go like you guys were back in the day when you guys only had like $5 to your name, right? Right? And so, but that's not the case. So that's what we're trying to get things to. So the question is, how do we get there? The president of the United States, he comes into his boardroom, maybe the Oval Office, he has all of his advisors in there. He said, Mr. President, we're on the brink of destruction, the whole world. He's like, okay, so what do we do? What are the solutions, So that's where I'm at now. Like, how do we build that reality? To me, it's not about that. I'm religious, I'm Jewish. That allows me to to continue to grow, become closer to Hashem, to be able to manifest these things, right? To be able to have the imagination, to feel worthy, to be able to be a channel, to allow Hashem to use me, right? So the mitzvot and everything that I'm doing is allowing Hashem, me to surrender myself. We're going against my desires, going against my thing. Every day it's a struggle. Every day you wake up and you wrap tefillin, it's a struggle. It's some force, and it's like something you can't even see that's trying to give you a reason to, oh, we'll do this first, or do that, or lay in the bed a little bit longer, or this, or you don't want to go outside, or you know what I mean? Like it's always like some type of challenge. And that's also Hashem, right? The desire that makes me want to wake up and wrap tefillin, and the desire that makes me want to procrastinate at times, that is the same force. And those forces are needed in order for me to connect to God properly when I have tefillin on. So how do we get to people who know very little about God? And how do we get them to become like righteous, like Siddiqim? How do we get them in the mindset where it's like, hey, they just want to talk to Hashem. Everything around them, they're thankful for it. And they want to enjoin the reality around them with goodness. And when they understand like how to properly do goodness, this is why the Bilam and Moshe dynamic is so important. It's so humongous. The more I think about it, Bilam and Moshe were both prophets. Bilam and Moshe had a tremendous amount of koach and strength and power in the world. But the difference between them is that that koach and that power that both of them possess, perhaps even equally, manifests itself completely two different ways by one having the Torah and one not, and one not. And the more you think about the Bilam dynamic, it's like Bilam, it's so true. I was just like thinking about it the other day. I think maybe this like early this morning, I was thinking like, you know what, as a non-Jewish person, when I look back on when I was looking at people that were successful, especially like working in like Hollywood and LA, that type of space, like when the more I looked at people that were successful, most of them were just really into like Tumadik stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was really like, I mean, if you think about like the concept of Bilam, right? Like the Zohar goes really into like how Bilam like would have sexual relations with his animals, and it would go out and just anything it could do to conjure the spirit of defilement, of that spiritual impurity. He would go out and cake it on himself. And you hear about these guys, entertainment business, and they like have intimacy with like hundreds of women, and eventually they even have sex with men, and they're bi and this and all these different dynamics, and they're doing like extra stuff. I know that one singer lady, what's her name, Azealia Banks, like she was like doing like voodoo, like cutting up chickens and their wings. Like, look at what these entertainers are doing. Look at what they're doing in these studios when they're creating this stuff, when they're writing. Think about the drugs they're doing. Think about like, the funny thing, like this lady accused Kanye and said Kanye paid her. She made a statement on a podcast that Kanye paid her $30,000 to come to a studio, completely revealed, right? And Kanye didn't even want to like had any dynamic with her. He just wanted her to dance around while he was writing some songs. He was using the tumor. He was using that dark energy to fuel his koach. This is Bilam. This is anybody who does not have the system of the Torah. They can only get koach from the dark side, because the dark side is very explicit, because the gateway to the dark side is through the five senses, right? What you see will lead you to the dark side. That's why the Torah forbids us to look at certain things. So you could find the dark side very easily. I could get on the bus and go to Tel Aviv, no problem. See how easy it is to find some of these tzaddikim where they're buried at. Go and try to find Rav and Abaya's caver in the south, in the north. So the point is just saying that it's very easy to connect to that. So when you see that is the reality, Bilam is not just, oh, we gave the non-Jewish world a prophet and he connected that. It's like, no, this is the greatest of what another person from another nation can achieve without having direction of the Torah. This Bilam, he has amazing ability, he has koach, he has power. But in the end, he only has the coordinates to get to the Tuma. Because you need coordinates, right? You need coordinates to know that there's a Hashem, to know that you have a neshama, knowing where to daven, how to daven, what to eat, not to eat. How are you going to use your five senses for that? You're going to go and look at something, and you're going to determine by looking at it that this is good for you or this is bad for you. You're going to be able to go and look at what when you decide to have, business partners or transactions or relations or intimacy, any of these things. I was telling these, we were like kind of like hosting this meal yesterday, And, it's like girls there, they were like, like younger, like Batshuva, somewhat Garen type of thing. And, I was just talking about this idea of like, protecting yourself, because the guys who are willing to come after you and commit sins, the Ari explains that as a man commits sins in that area, the spiritual foreskin starts to grow back. The spiritual foreskin starts to grow back, right? And the spiritual, in that part, the yesod, that crown that's there, is directly connected to a man's dot, his ability to reason. When we do Havdalah, it's all about building dot, right? It's all about being able to separate light and darkness, understanding that light and darkness, right, are coming from two different sides, but Hashem is bringing them together. He makes them work together. They're in partnership, right? But to be able to understand that separation and to see that ability to separate all things, but all things still being unified. And so a man that damages that part of himself through actions, through thoughts, that diminishes his ability to bring down wisdom of Hashem into your life. And if you're having relationships with such a person, you're receiving the energy of a man that's disconnected from the life force of Hashem. And that's the energy that you're receiving inside of yourself. So the Torah itself gives us the commandment to procreate, gives us the desire to procreate, gives us the koach for procreation by giving in that pasuk, right? But then our mafarshim come and explain to us in our generation how to access that power, right? How to manifest that power. So if a man is not in that space, he's not going to bring you any wisdom. He's not going to bring you darkness. He's going to make you depressed. He's going to take away. He's not going to enhance your life. You're not going to be able to fix anything, right? And the same thing for a guy who goes out, he sleeps with some woman that's in Tuma. Do you realize how impure you are to God? How disgusted he is by you? Right? And the same thing for a Jewish guy who goes and sleeps outside the nation. God is disgusted by you. Intentionally, right? So, so this is where we're at. Now, the thing is, I want to talk a little bit about this idea of like thought creating reality, right? And the thoughts that we have, and how important it is to have pure thoughts, right? How to think about like what is it to have a pure thought? What is it to have a pure thought? What is it to have pure thoughts? How do I get rid of impure thoughts, right? There's a story about Adam in the beginning of creation, and Adam is explaining to Chava to not eat from the Eitz Hadas, right? The tree of good and evil, the tree of knowledge, the tree of good and bad, right? And so when he told Chava about this rule that Hashem gave, or was explaining to her, he told her that they cannot eat and they can't even touch. And so the Midrashim says that Adam, when he told his wife that, he was so like enamored by this thought that came to him to create a takana, to create a fence, that there was an aspect of egoism in it. And he didn't explain how was it egoism, because he didn't explain to his wife the difference between God's law and something that he added to protect her from going over God's law. He didn't explain it in that way. Now think about that, right? Adam says something that Hashem necessarily didn't tell him to say, right? And he added it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he didn't explain that this was what he brought to the table. And this is what God said. And now let's think about that. So that's a big concept, right? This is say, if that is a concept of a person creates something, right? They add something and they give information and they have a thought, and it's a thought that's aspect of impurity, and they put that thought out in the world, right? Hashem utilized his wife to create the entire reality of his impure thought. The whole concept of Adam, of Chava and the Nachash, is her dealing with this situation of innovation. The Nachash says to her, Nachash says, the Midrashim says, Midrash Rabbah says that the Nachash, the serpent, comes to Chava, to Eve, and says to her, he says, hey, you know, if you eat that tree, you're going to be able to be a creator like God. God ate from the same tree and he created the world. And so he doesn't want you to have that same power, so he's telling you not to eat it, which is a whole big concept. We could talk about feminism out of this whole movement, the whole thing, but we're understanding the dynamic of the DNA of all human beings on planet Earth right now. And in this frame of reference, Eve is tempted by going beyond the boundaries of Hashem, by going to a level, to a status of being like Hashem. Where does she get that from? Where did that knowledge come from? Where did such a desire come from? I would say that it came from her husband. Him giving that extra takana, him not consulting with Hashem to do it, him being impressed by himself, him wanting to be like God. What is the whole concept of him creating the takana? He wants to be like Hashem. He wants to be like Hashem. He wants to be greater than man. And so he says, Hashem created a law and he gave me a law, I'm going to give her a law. And so she created this reality where eventually death came into the world. But it wasn't her. She is Adam's dot. She's Adam's dot. She's expressing his dot. So this is the beginning. This is the beginning of the transition and the beginning of creation. So as we're talking about transforming and creating this a new world, a new society, we have to understand like what that means. That we have to go back. It's only through the Torah do we have the coordinates to start imagining a new world where people can look at their desires and look at how they were built and not be upset, not feel judged, feel beautiful, but also recognize that there's a grind, that there's a struggle. There's a process. And the process that we have, Baruch Hashem, we have the outline of that process that's given to us through our sages, through the transmission of the Masorah explaining to us what our ancestors were in the very beginning of creation. Like, how lucky are we that we can analyze ourselves at every emotion, every thought, every desire. We could look at the existence, the beginning of Adam and Chava, and we can learn about who we are right now, what we're going through. And it's okay. That's how we were made, right? So it must be perfect. But how do we evolve? How do we go past that? How do we elevate? How do we build a reality where we are living our best life, as they say in our world? And what is the best life? Living all of our days. What is living all of our days? Living our purpose, right? What's our purpose? to correct our soul. We need coordinates for that. Because if we just look at the outside world and we just look at what was around us, we will be convinced of ideas that could be counterintuitive to our soul's creation. It brings even more darkness to our soul. So this is a thought, coming into this new week, is to connect, is just this kind of like transitional type of frame. And how do we activate Torah in our everyday life? Torah is about connection. Torah is about understanding. Torah is about instructions on how to achieve my purpose, my soul's correction, the world's soul's correction, your nation, your families, everybody. It's all these micro and mini corrections that we learn about. My personal correction, me, you and your spouse, you and your family, you and your community, you and your outside community, you and other nations. There's all these corrections that God gives us access to throughout this process called life. And this access that we have, is there for the ultimate purpose, which is the correction of our soul. So when we're talking about moving society forward, we're saying creating a place in society where the world could be thinking about the correction of their soul and the collective soul of planet Earth. How do we correct? I'm telling you, it's not, in my mind, it's no different than consumer products. It's the difference between Bilam and Moshe. That's it. And in the early start of the world, people like the Bilams were the famous ones, right? Now, towards the end of days, the Moshes become the famous ones, right? Because they have instructions, right? And so the way of Tuma, nobody's been successful that route. So we're going to go on this transition, and we're just going to start building on this Tachlis point. We're going to keep, on this frame of new perceptions, new reality. That's the energy. Tonight is Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat is all about the transition, right? It's the transition where the tree says, I can recreate myself. I was in the winter, it was dark, I wasn't growing, everything was falling apart, everything was dying. Even at times, maybe I thought I was over. But you know what? Nope. God gave me this extra koach, and I can recreate myself. Last night, on Friday night, I taught this Torah that I learned in the Zohar, and it talks about the power of Netilat Yadayim. And it says that each of the fingers, you have 3 limbs, joints, sorry, you have 3 joints in each finger. And in your thumb, you have 2, right? So in total, you have like 14, right? So you put your 2 of them together, 2 hands, that equals 28. 28 is the gematria of the word koach, which is power. The power of Hashem, it says into you. That power is what we ignite Shabbos night at our fingertips. That we have the power to literally whatever we touch in this world, is directly connected to what God has created for us in the upper worlds. It's one. It's one. And we have the power of God, that all the hand movements, everything that we do, all the oneg that we participate in, all of it is connected to Shema. It also says that the first verse in Bereshit also has 28 letters, right? One is the gematria of 28. This is 28 letters, but they're saying it also is connected to the koach of the creation of the creation of the creation of the world. The whole idea of Bina and Malchus, and Bina being clothed in Malchus, as they talk about the coast. But the point is just saying, this is the power of Netilat Yadayim, to the point, the Zohar says, people who don't take Netilat Yadayim seriously put their lives in great risk, because this is the power of creation. Is that so? If you nullify the power of creation, which you're supposed to be bringing into this world, you could actually, if you're nullifying, you can nullify yourself. So it's just one side point. But the point is saying right now we're in this process of transition, right? We're in this process of transition. And so this is the time of the year. This is the time that's going on. But what are we transitioning to? The transitioning that I'm talking about is a transitioning that we can build a new hashkafa, like a new outlook on how to see reality, right? And instead of getting into, like, with the masses I'm talking about, instead of getting into, specific points, but why not just give them a picture and say, hey, this is how creation looks. This is how God bestows his light. This is how you were created. This is your soul. And this is what the Torah is saying. But I'm saying, but communicating it in a way that is understandable to that person today. Like that kid is walking down the street right now with his iPhone, with his iPhone earphones in, and he's walking down the street, and he's just like, no, 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 no. He's walking down the street. How can we get that guy to be able to walk down the street and look at that tree and be like, God is there? And see that person who's walking by him, that's a completely different ethnicity, someone he'd never even met, and like that person is godly and he has something to offer. And then the person who's looking at him is also thinking the same things. And how we create laws and businesses and social structures will be based from this hashkafa, right? Of being able of people to see the inner essence, the 99% of reality, right? Like I wrote in the book, My Inner Black Jew, there's the 1% reality, there's the 99% reality. But the world seeing each other in reality and everything that exists from the 99% perspective, even in things that are not even physical. Right? We were learning this idea of like speech and voice, or voice and speech rather. And how voice is how speech is the manifestation of voice. And they work in conjunction together. So there's certain things that aren't even physical that have a physical expression in the spiritual expression of it. We say Ze'er and Pen and Malchut, light and vessel, whatever. But the point is just saying that that's what we're building towards. So we want to build that reality. To me, I think that's an amazing objective. I mean, I don't know. I mean, because you understand, like in the entertainment business, most of the time, you're creating thoughts. You know what I'm saying? Because like most of the things that exist in entertainment are content, right? So content or audience is probably even better. Most things in entertainment, revolve around audience. So it's like that audience that you create, there's people that want to communicate with them. So whatever you're creating has to include the objectives of whatever that third party is, right? Whatever that sneaker company is, soft drink, maybe political concept or whatever. Like they want to be involved in it, and they want to pay for it, right? So from that place, why can't we create thoughts that allow people to connect themselves? Another thing too, like also another thing about fashion and trends is that like with fashion and trends, most of it is just a feeling. You know what I mean? Like whatever trend, whatever fashion thing you see, it's a feeling. It's like you just feel it, and you just feel like, oh man, this is dope. Like you understand, like so much fashion is like from teenagers who are just being experimental for various reasons. And so that particular guy started wearing his pants this way, and then his friends started doing it, and then they went to other parties, and then next thing you know, other kids saw it, and then it became a thing, and then that neighborhood got known for dressing this way, and then someone else saw it, and next thing you know, there's someone is rapping in that style, and then like, oh, that represents this, and then certain people get involved. It becomes an international thing. I've seen it happen several times in real life, in my own personal, like Malchus, working and stuff, and so I see, people could be done. Now you can't force anybody to do it, but you could, of course, but you could show, because the righteous people of the world want they want to connect their souls. They may not want to be Jewish. They may not want to be any religion, right? And the goal is not to be Jewish. The goal is to be connected to God. That's the goal. For me, this is my spiritual system, my tradition of keeping myself in the mindset and the strength and the ability to do God's work, right? Not to like just, so I don't commit sin. No, it's about doing God's work for the rest of humanity. And I'm using the past life skills and abilities that I had and saying, well, how can I incorporate Torah into that? How can I incorporate Torah into that? Oh, really? How can I that's where I'm at now. So all these different modules and things that I did before, they're kalim vessels for me to bring Torah into. So now it's like, okay, so let's do some movies expressing the Torah, and let's say, okay, well, you say the Torah, so when am I gonna do another Bible movie? When I'm gonna do another Bible story movie? No, I'm gonna do stories about regular, experiences that I had as an African American Jew, in very diversely populated places and of Jews. And I'm gonna talk about those experiences and experiences that I saw, like other people go through and these types of things. This is what I'm into. And this to me, this is how you communicate Torah, by showing a Jewish life and explaining why we do the things that we do. That's, to me, that's the new dynamic of it, bringing Torah out in the world, in creating questions around the Torah. Before, in the past, we had to keep things concealed because there were so many brutal, people from other nations that, wanted to have control psychologically over the masses. And so the Torah and the Jewish people were a problem for them. So they prohibited the ability for Torah to be disseminated or creative thought around it, but we're not in that era anymore. So now we're in the era where ideas and information are pervasive, right? So my thing is like, okay, so why not? Like, I mean, just imagine, like, I mean, I know there's a lot of negativity with social media, but look how much activities social media created in the world. Like, how many people feel connected? How many people feel unified? How many people from your past you would never have any contact with right now if it wasn't for your MySpace page or your Facebook page? How many memories, how many things you've experienced that no one would even know ever happened, that now thousands of people, happen. How many new people have you met? How many new relationships? How many marriages? How many children have been a byproduct of people meeting on social media? So just saying, like, this is a powerful mechanism. Now, can you control everything? No, because it's going to depict the truth of society. But the point, nevertheless, is that it's a social technology that brought octaves. It's not my personal thing, but I'm not into like creating social technologies at this point, at least. But in this way of like, software, but maybe in the future, who knows? But my overall point is being able to recognize the things that have already been created in the world that have created massive changes of positivity, even if that wasn't the intention behind it, or maybe it was, or maybe it was a distorted idea, maybe it wasn't coming from that pure place of thought, right? But nevertheless, we who have coordinates, right? The Jewish people, we have coordinates through our Torah, through our sages, to be able to take what exists today and apply it to the principles of the past and see it in a whole new dimension. And so going forward, we have to have that in mind. We have to have this dynamic of wanting to, create a new world and benefit just all of humanity, and it's creating a new world. And I know it sounds like very optimistic and, grandiose, or any of these terms that they use to keep us thinking small. But the reality is that we can do anything. And if we want to bring thoughts of concept and ideas into the world that allow people to see a broader perspective of life and more to the reality around them, God will bless us with success and nothing can stop us. Baruch atah Adonai le'olam, amen, amen.